A Nefarious Nightmare is a true crime podcast focusing on lesser-known crimes and crimes against those deemed extra vulnerable.
Every now and then, we cover more well-known crimes due to the fact that it is relevant or even interesting regarding the cases we cover. And the B is a symbol for all victims as we recognize their strength, resilience, and vulnerability.
So join us. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or just about any podcast platform. Remember, when you mess with the bees,
you get the hive.
You're listening to Sirens, a true crime podcast, brought to you by the Sirens Network. This podcast contains explicit content, so listener discretion is advised. The opinions expressed on this podcast are solely the views of the hosts and do not reflect the views of affiliates, associates, or sponsors of this podcast. This is Sirens, a true crime podcast.
The Freeman Bible saga contains interviews from Lorene Bible, Laura's mother, Lisa Broderick, Laura's cousin, and Jax Miller, author of Hell in the Heartland. Mandy and I have collectively been working on this case for almost a year now. We have connected to it deeply and hope that you will do the same. If you have any information on where Laura or Ashley can be found, please contact police. Leave a tip with the girls' Facebook page, or you can leave an anonymous tip on our website at www.thesirenspodcast.com/contact. Thank you for listening.
The sheriff once told me this part of Oklahoma was haunted, that once you're a part of it, you can't ever leave.
Anyway, I have with me today, I'm Raven, by the way, in case anybody wondered. Today I have with me again, Professor Mandy McNeely.
Hello.
And she worked pretty closely with me on this case that we're going to bring to you today, which is the Ashley Freeman Laura Bible case. Now, we did some digging for this one.
Yes.
I need to know everything about it, especially since this all happened in one roundabouts area, Vanita and Pitcher and Welch, Oklahoma, around in there. And from where we sit currently, that is, depending, an hour to an hour and a half to 2 hours away.
Yeah.
And so we were like, we need to get up there.
Yes.
And so we got in contact with, well, first of all, I got in contact with Jax, who actually wrote Hell in the Heartland.
Who's amazing.
And she has agreed to be on the podcast as well. She has given us so much resources and like information. It's just been crazy. And she actually got us in contact with Lorene Bible, which is Laura's mother. And so this is going to be kind of a very different sort of podcast episode, because what we're doing is we went up and interviewed Lorene. So when it comes to you, we're going to have it all in one nice, delicious bundle. What I want to do with this is we are going to tell you about this case, and then I am going to patch in Lorene's interview that we did, and you'll have to mind the birds, because we were actually sitting outside at the memorial with her when we recorded this, and all I had was my remote recorder. So mind the chirping, but I think that it still sounds great. She sounded great, and she has a lot of information. I want to let her tell you this story from her point of view.
She's such an advocate,
We're kind of doing the same thing with Jax, so when we get her on here, we're going to have more than likely a 2-part, maybe even a 3-part episode here. So
I think this story will engulf you like it did us. It really grabs you.
It haunts me. Like, that's the perfect word for it. We went to, we started this journey. Of course, we read the book, we did the digging, we did the research, we learned everything we could about this case, and then we went and talked to Lorene. We met her in Veneta.
First, we met her in
Veneta. And we were supposed to meet her at this one little park or whatever, and they were having like a party there. I was like, that's
a birthday
not
party.
appropriate.
Yeah.
So we ended up just going ahead and following her to the memorial site for the girls, which is in Pitcher. And if you guys haven't heard our episode on Pitcher yet, you need to go back and listen to that like right now, because you're gonna want to know about this place. You're gonna want to know about everything about it before you jump into this, because it's one of the key places in this story.
And it is a bizarre place.
It is, yeah. And I'm pretty sure that when we were there, I might have gotten a little bit of radiation poisoning.
Well, and I had metallic gold coming down my arm.
Yeah, you did, yeah. We were there, like I said, we were there with her for about 2 hours, and I was feeling it by the time that we left. I had a headache, and I was
windy,
kind of nauseous, and yeah, and the thing about it is, when you go back and you listen to the Pitcher episode, we portrayed it as this ghost town. Now, when I did the episode, I had never been to Pitcher before, and granted, there are most of it, big parts of it is, yes, a ghost town. Yes. But there is a road that goes right through it. Right through the middle. And it's a nice road, and there's plenty of people on it. And it goes, I think we accidentally ended up in Kansas at one point, because, I mean, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump from Pitcher to Kansas. Yeah. We ended up having to turn around and go, oops, and come back. But yeah, there's still people going through there. Even when we were at the memorial, there were people driving by. There's people living there. So I'm not really sure, like, I don't know why people say that it's absolute ghost town, because there are people there.
It was quite busy, surprisingly.
Yeah, it was bumbling. It
quite
was
busy past the memorial, too.
Yeah.
A lot of people went down to, I think, see the memorial.
Which the memorial wasn't too far off the main road.
You can't go too far.
Yeah, no.
There's so many places that the roads are caved in.
Yes, and that's the thing, is that we don't recommend you going to Pitcher. We did this as part of our research. We knew the risks going to Pitcher. We knew that there was going to be radiation. We knew that there was a huge possibility that our car might just get enveloped in a mine or something, that the road could wash out at any minute. We knew all the risks, and the fact that it is just absolute covered in chat piles everywhere. Like, you drive into it, you know you're in Pitcher, because you start seeing all those chat piles.
And the water's metallic green.
Yes. And it was weird, because we saw a deer on the way out. We saw a deer, and it looked fine, I think.
It's just passing through.
But while we were there, it was really neat, because there were a lot of butterflies.
There were.
That were
right
there
in the memorial.
At the memorial. Yeah, and she was telling us that something about, what was it she was saying about the butterflies? That she always thought that the butterflies were some sort of sign that Laura was like there. She was like reaching out or whatever. So I thought it was really weird that we were basically sitting there covered in butterflies this whole time.
But you're in a place that the roads that are really drivable are the main road, or maybe one or two roads outside of that.
Yeah.
And there's chat piles everywhere, and then you go to this memorial and there's butterflies and birds chirping. And so, it's almost like you're in this peaceful, serene, surrounded by all this chaos.
It was really peaceful. Yeah, it really was.
And so it just really kind of signify.
It was somber, but it was also serene. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
so we'll just start at the beginning. Lorene Bible. She was born April 18th, 1983, and Ashley Freeman, who was born December 30th, 1983. Now, all of this stuff takes place in 99. So we're going back. And I just, since the girls are technically missing, I just want to put this out real quick. It's just a real quick description of the girls, just in case. You never know. And so Laura was 5'5", Ashley was 5'7". Laura was about 130 pounds. Ashley was about 145. So they're both Caucasian females. Laura had brown hair, hazel eyes. She had a little mole under her nose. It looked like, what do they call those?
A beauty mark?
Yeah, a beauty mark. And she also had a scar on her head and pierced ears. Ashley, on the other hand, is dark blonde. I think what you call a dishwater blonde. Blue eyes, a scar on the upper left side of her forehead, and a very athletic build. These girls were amazing.
Lisa Bible Broderick is my name, and I'm Laura's cousin. We were raised more like sisters, but she is my cousin. 6 years younger than me. Well, the dynamic, which is so funny, I'm the oldest, I'm the firstborn grandchild, oldest granddaughter, and then we have Melissa, who's 3 years younger than me, and then Laura was 3 years younger than her. So the three of us did everything together. There were only 5 granddaughters total, and there's 19 grandkids.
Wow.
So lots of boys in our family. And my grandparents had 8 children, 6 boys, 2 girls.
Yeah.
Which 2 of them had passed away, but always more boys. So us girls kind of stuck together.
Yeah.
And oddly, now I have my daughter and then my 2 nieces is exactly the same. That 3-year spread for all 3 of them. So it's so bizarre sometimes watching them, because it's just like a repeat of what it was for us.
History repeats itself.
Yeah. Well, she was always the one that was following us around, wanting to do what we were doing. And her being the baby, she was the jokester of the family, but you could manipulate her to do anything.
Oh, no.
You know, like... One of the things that we always loved to do, and I talk about this a lot when we were kids, especially around 4th of July when firecrackers would come out, we would set a bucket out on the ground and light a firecracker and throw it underneath, and somebody had to sit on the bucket to topped. And so she would always be the kid to sit on the bucket while we threw a firecracker under.
Ever sit on the bucket once.
So fun. You should totally do that. 10-gallon bucket. So much fun. But she wouldn't shy away from doing anything. She wanted to do whatever we told her to do. You know, and she was a little baby doll. We'd dress her up, and she was she didn't grow for the longest time. So she was like 8 years old, still wearing like toddler clothes because she was so little.
Oh my gosh.
She was our own little baby doll. I'd set her up on the stool and fix her hair and makeup every weekend, all weekend long. Like, come to grandma's, let's go do hair and makeup, and that's what we did. So
now, was she into hair and makeup later?
Oh,
because of that?
Yeah.
Because I could see that happening.
It was probably forced upon her. We probably pulled her hair so many times with a hairbrush that she thought, one day, I'm going to pay them back.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah,
for sure.
But she was just the fun kid, you know? Like, I feel like there's one in every family that just radiates fun.
Yeah.
And she was that kid. And it's
the goof.
She was.
Crazy kid.
You couldn't upset her.
Yeah.
Everything was a joke. She would smile and laugh about everything. And even if she got mad at you, all you'd do is look at her cross-eyed and she'd bust up laughing, and then it was over. You know, that's it. Time to move on. Whereas the rest of us could be mad and cross our arms and stomp off. She was not that kid.
It makes you wonder, like, if that personality would have stayed with her, you know? Like, that's rare, I think, is to have a personality that you don't get just, like, immediately upset. That's just kind of like, let's just kind of let it go.
Yeah.
It's not worth holding on to or whatever.
Yeah.
You know?
She had that infectious, you couldn't help but smile when you were around her. And if you weren't smiling, she was going to make you smile.
Yeah.
Like, that's just how she was. We had taken a vacation once. We did every summer. We went to Colorado to go camping. And my Aunt Lorene had a Blazer, white Blazer, and so her and my Uncle Jay drove, and the 3 of us girls were in the back seat all the way. I think she sang to us.
Was she a good singer?
Way. No.
Oh.
But it didn't matter. She didn't know she wasn't. I mean, she was probably okay. I don't know. But because we were kids, and it was just like.
Did she have like a favorite song that she liked to sing?
I don't really remember what a favorite song would have been.
Just whatever it was, she was just belting
Reba
it.
McEntire. That was Reba was my favorite.
Okay.
So that became her favorite.
Okay.
Yeah, and that particular trip, I remember when we got to Colorado and we were like, okay, the music's off. No, she took her little boombox and climbs up on the side of the mountain. So we're in this valley. She turns it on, and here she's sitting up there just singing at the top of her lungs, and it's just echoing.
Oh my goodness.
Somewhere, somebody it has a picture. They're bound to have a picture still of her sitting on the side of that mountain with her little boom box in her arms, just singing her little lungs out. Didn't matter what was going on. Like, that's who she was. That was her personality.
That is amazing.
Like, where the rest of us would never have been caught dead doing that, she didn't care.
Carefree's the way to be.
She was, yeah, definitely. I hadn't been out there since I was 17. The summer before my senior year was the last time I went. And so it had been a while, and a couple of summers ago, I'm trying to remember if it was it was right before COVID hit. In the fall. It wasn't in the summer. It was in the fall, about this time of year. I had really wanted to go since both our grandparents had passed away. It just was really pulling on me to go back. And so that was the first time I had been back out there, and I was able to drive right to our campsite, and I hadn't been there since I was 17.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm like, I know, because I went so many times. I'm like, I know I can find it. It looks a little different because I was much older. It didn't look as big as it did when I was a kid.
Yeah. Isn't that weird? How everything looks so big, and then you get older and you're like, well, this isn't what I read.
The river, because it was right on the Rio Grande, and I'm like, man, that seemed a whole lot bigger when I was a kid. Now it's like a watering hole. What's going on here? Yeah, and so we were out there on the campsite, and I just remember looking up on that mountain, and I could just see her sitting there, even though, you know, it'd been that many years. So cool. And that trip, I'm trying to remember.
You think they'd be mad if we painted a boombox on that rock?
I was probably maybe 13 or 14 that trip.
I could make that happen, actually. I know someone that lives there.
So, yeah, it was just like being in that spot. I could just almost hear and see her up on the side of that mountain again. So
cool. Ashley was a tomboy, if there ever was one. She really enjoyed hunting and fishing and raising farm animals and being outdoors. And Laura, on the other hand, was a cheerleader, and she was described as, quote, always being in the middle of everything. That's how family members described her. She had to be in the middle of everything. She also loved farm animals, and I think that's kind of where the two girls bonded.
When did her and Ashley meet? Weren't they? They were pretty young.
They were always friends, yeah. Yep. And I didn't ever really know Ashley all that much, oddly enough. I mean, I knew who she was, and I knew that they were friends.
Yeah.
But when we were doing family stuff, Ashley wasn't there so much. Yeah. So I never really, I knew Ashley. I knew who she was, but I didn't really know her. Shane, I just knew of him. I knew who he was, but I didn't have a relationship with him.
Go to the same school.
No. Yeah. So he would have been about 3 years younger than me. Yeah. Yeah, and of course he was at Welch. I graduated here from Miami.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Laura was at Blue Jacket, which I had been to Blue Jacket and then moved here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And she was super into animals and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. Yep. She liked to show.
4-H?
Yep. FFA, all that stuff.
Yes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. All into her show animals. That was her thing. When I was 16, that was kind of the year, 16, 17 was whenever they told us we couldn't drag Maine anymore. Mm-hmm. And so by the time she was driving, that wasn't even a thing anymore. Yeah. So, any given Friday, Saturday night, we were always uptown because that's what we did. We drove, dragged Maine, went to Sonic, hung out in the parking lot. Mm-hmm. All teenagers could be found there. By that time, they weren't doing that anymore.
I feel like it was like
woods. Creek that ran behind Ashley's house.
Let's go on an adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they spent a lot of time.
That's where that picture was taken. The token picture.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm, in front of the creek.
I guess I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That they spent a lot of time back in there.
We would
goofing around.
Back there playing the creek, playing
ditches.
You know, doing that stuff. We always played in the hay barn. We would build forts in the hay barn. Things like that. But the creek that ran back in there was really pretty, and it was just a fun place for them to go hang out back there if they went. And but Ashley probably spent more time at Laura's house than Laura did at Ashley's house.
Yeah.
You know, so. And really kind of by the point that she was so tied up with her farm animals, I had gotten married. And so we kind of had that, we were all growing up, and she was doing her thing, and Melissa was doing her thing, and I was doing my thing. And so that last few years, we didn't see each other as much as we did because I had gotten married and was trying to build a life. And I mean, nonetheless, I still saw her on the weekends whenever I would go to grandma's or whatever.
And so when the girls were little, they only lived 2 miles away from each other. They had regular play dates. And so they became inseparable and just kind of bonded over, you know, the young bond, you know. And then later in high school, Laura's family actually moved to Veneta, right?
Well, and Ashley's parents moved to Welch.
Okay. Yeah. See, that's the one thing that I forget where they originally lived at.
They lived originally in Veneta.
Okay.
And then they moved to Welch to some of Danny Freeman's family's land, I believe.
Right. Okay. And so they kind of had to do this. They were going to separate high schools at the time. And of course, you know, that makes it harder to hang out, you know, all day, every day.
And it's not really close.
No, it's not. I mean, you know, when we went up there, we started in Tulsa, and we ended up going through Veneta and then heading to Welch, and then going from Welch to Pitcher. And it is it's like an hour from Tulsa to Veneta, and then it's like 40-ish minutes from Veneta to Welch.
It's further than I thought it was going to be.
And actually, I think Welch is closer to Pitcher than Veneta is to Welch.
It seemed that way.
It was like 17, 18 minutes, I think, if I remember correctly. I could be totally wrong.
No, it was a little ways. I was surprised how far away it was. So that would show why the girls didn't really get to hang out all that much.
Well, and not only that, but neither of them at the time. Okay, so Laura had just turned 16 in April. She was the only one with a vehicle. Ashley, when all of this stuff we're about to talk about happened, she had just. So yeah, I mean, the girls it was basically Laura had to drive to her, pick her up and take her home, or, you know, whatever. And so
when they got together, then they liked to spend, you know, a little bit more time together because they didn't get to see each other that much. So I think this particular time, it was the holidays. They were out for the holidays. It was Ashley's birthday.
Yeah, it was like weekends at a time.
So they were together like days at a time, you know, during this period.
Do you remember the last time you saw her?
At Christmas, right before she left, before she was taken. Yeah. Christmas Eve, actually. Yeah, my grandpa's birthday is Christmas Day. So tradition always was Christmas Eve night was always spent with the grandparents.
Okay.
And we would celebrate Grandpa's birthday and do gifts. So it would have been Christmas Eve night.
Was her favorite too, right?
Yeah, I don't know how that happened, that we're so Christmas crazy. And you know, it's so crazy because we always celebrate Laura's birthday and we think about it being her birthday. Oddly, until last year, it's like it totally would just skip my mind that the 29th was her birthday. Like, that's why Laura was there. That's why we're in this situation. It was, she'd went for Ashley's birthday. Yeah. But it just is, that's just the day that everything went wrong. And I forget that was Ashley's birthday.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and she had stayed with her for a few days. She'd been
she
there
was on her second night.
Yeah.
So then we go to the night of December 29th, 1999. And I believe that day they had celebrated Ashley's 16th birthday. Laura was there during the celebration.
She had spent the night before.
She had, yeah. And Ashley's parents were there, Danny and Kathy Freeman. Her boyfriend, Jeremy Hurst, was there, and they celebrated at the Freeman's mobile home. Lorene gave us the directions to go and check out where the home was. And it is not in Veneta.
No. And there's several articles out on the internet or several social media sites that say it's in Veneta, and it is not. It's actually outside of Welch city limits.
It's right outside of Welch, about 10 miles right outside of Welch.
And it is very rural.
Extremely. We kind of got lost.
Extremely rural.
Getting
and
there.
I mean, I say rural and you're thinking, okay, it's like off of a main road. No, it's off of a main road, off of a main road.
Yeah, and there were like deer and stuff on the side of the road as we were driving in there. So, and like cows and the thing about it too is that there weren't any and even at the time there weren't any neighbors. There's like one house on the corner when you first turn in there, and then you go down there
far down too.
Yeah, it was miles down that road.
Yeah.
Dirt road. Yeah. So it's not in Veneta, just BT dubs. Yes. It's right outside of Welch, about 10 minutes. But anyway, so they actually left there around 9:30 p.m. The girls had spent the day prepping for a livestock showing for the county fair and the state fair. They were part of the FFA, which is the Future Farmers of America, and the 4-H club they both belong to. Ashley had 2 goats named Jack and Jill, and Laura had 2 pigs and a lamb. I don't know why I needed that information, but I'm glad that I have it.
I love pigs.
So, sometime during the night or the early morning hours of December 30th, 1999, a fire erupted inside the Freeman's mobile home. Now, a concerned neighbor, and when I say concerned neighbor, what I mean is a guy driving along the road from miles from his home just happened by it because they don't have really any neighbors. Yeah.
Oh.
And he went to work every morning at like 5 o'clock or something in the morning.
Saw it
So yeah, he saw it. And so he apparently drove close to it, and he is the one that called 911 around 5:50 a.m. on the morning of December 30th, 1999. The Welch Fire Department responded at 6:10 a.m. They got there at 6:10. Now, we just told you it's only 10 minutes outside of Welch, and it took them 20 minutes to get there. Granted, it's a volunteer fire department.
And it is hard to find.
It is hard to find. I mean, sometimes you assume that like everyone knows where everyone lives, especially if you live out there alone, but that's not necessarily true, because we lived kind of in a rural place like this when I was younger. We lived outside of Kanawha, Oklahoma. I did not know anyone around me except the direct neighbor next to me, so I couldn't tell you who lived out there. But yeah, so they responded 20 minutes later. They fought the flames for, now it says, some places it says 1 hour, some places it says 3 hours.
There's some discrepancy in the timing there.
I'm not exactly sure how long it took them, but I do know that they fought it until the trailer collapsed under the pressure of the water that was coming from the hoses.
Yes. Well, and how long was it going before
and that's
the
a
neighbor
great question.
called in the... I mean, it could have been going, because it looks like it had been probably going for a while, but...
They had, at one point, they had assumed that it had began somewhere between 3 and 4 a.m.
Yeah, so probably a good hour.
A good hour, yeah, is what we assume. So, the CCSO was at the scene soon after the fire department with Sheriff George Vaughn in charge, and along with him came Under Sheriff Mark Hayes, Lieutenant Jim Herman, and Investigator Charles Cozart, and Deputy Troy Messick. So, Dwayne Vansell, who was Danny Freeman's stepbrother and Ashley's uncle, was 25 minutes away from the home at the doctor's office that morning when he was informed that the house was on fire. When he got to the scene, the undersheriff walked him up to the house. This is so crazy. If this
I'm just over here shaking my head.
If this is the first time that you're hearing of this case, just get ready is all I'm going to say, because you're going to be like, okay, well, she's got wrong information, obviously. No, I don't.
No, it is correct.
So yeah, just Just wait. So yes, walked him up to the house and informed him that they had found a body inside the home. They actually led him to the body and let him see it. Of course, Dwayne at this time assumed that it's Kathy Freeman, which is Ashley's mother.
I would like to add that the reason I think it was assumed that it was her is because there was a waterbed in the bedroom that had burst with the fire, and it had actually preserved some of the body because of the water being around. So it was, I think, a little bit easier to identify her. I mean, you would think because the house was burned down that it would have been really hard, but I think because of the water, it actually preserved, so you'd be able to tell it was a woman.
I do know that one side of her, the side that was exposed, was pretty much burnt up. But they had actually turned the body over, and yes, the water, I think, preserved it. The other side was, I'm not going to say fully identifiable, but enough. CCSO deputies noted that the body was found near 7:30 a.m. 3 minutes later, the deputies were back in the front yard vacating the crime scene. The body was found by the fire department. It was only briefly observed by the deputies. It was in the bedroom, in the master bedroom. She was lying face down in the wrong direction on the bed, and the fire had destroyed much of the exposed part of her body. The upper back and butt were burned down to the muscle, and the feet and lower legs had been burned completely off, from what I understand. Her skull was shattered. Around her head, bricks were scattered around. At the time, they didn't know if the bricks had fallen during the fire and killed her because she was sleeping or what had happened. They initially assumed that she was struck by a brick and killed that way. But the deputies out front refused to re-enter the home until OSBI showed up.
When they got up there, found out the Freeman's house was on fire that morning, they found Kathy laying over the waterbed, the only floor left in the house. Saw her body. The sheriff department immediately stopped what they were doing. The fire department finished putting out the fire that was smoldering and stood back. They said, Lorene, we watched those deputies just go sit down and call. And they called OSBI in.
And there's some backstory there on that relationship between that county's department.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that a little later. And Lorene also has some insight on that. We're going to kind of move forward here, and then we'll give you some backstory here in a little bit. So, an autopsy determined that Kathy had been actually shot to death.
Donna Warren. So we had to wait for her to get done. Both days, actually. The first day she was doing a wreck, and she had to go pronounce somebody dead at the scene. By the time she gets out to the Freemans, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so we'd sit there from 8 o'clock in the morning to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, not doing nothing.
That's a long time.
That's such a long
And
time.
even when the OSBI agents got there, they kind of like looked around, but they didn't move anything, because every floor, because the back side of the trailer was a trailer home, and they'd built on a living room and a bedroom on the front of it. But all the floors had burnt through.
My goodness.
And everything that was up high fell down, like the refrigerators, the deep freezers and stuff, everything had fell through
They
the
weren't
hole.
even looking under stuff.
No, they didn't move anything. They said they did. They told me they did. Anyway, by the time we get there then, they take it out, and I go up there, and I asked Donna Warren, I said, Donna, that woman on across that waterbed up there, is that Kathy? The flames made the water leak.
But it didn't actually burst?
No, it seeped out. That's why that was the only...
Preserved.
That's the only reason that part of the bedroom didn't burn too. You could tell, whoever did it took a stringent and took it in there. As you walk in the front door, because you walk in the door from the south to the north, you walk in, there's a big wood stove right there.
Right.
So they had it was real pitch black in front of that stove. The stove caught the house on fire. Well, they went there, then they went around, because her couch was this way, and you had to go into the couch opening for the recliner and the couch, and around the coffee table, because the TV would be right where you are, catty-cornered. And then you come out, and then they went around the kitchen table.
With accelerant?
Uh-huh.
Walked around and
See,
just put it around.
That's one thing. I've read Jax's book a couple of times, but I've never seen that. I've never heard
some
in
stuff
there.
she was told she couldn't put in there
Oh,
because
okay.
it's an open investigation.
Sure. Right.
Yeah.
And when we
Right.
got to the time, some of the stuff would have been reviewed that just come out. So as she did her book, she would have to send it to me and Lisa.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And we would say,
that makes sense.
This can't because this is an open
It
case.
would only
Right.
be known to somebody that did it.
Arson investigators determined that the fire had been deliberately set and accelerant had been used. This is one of those pieces of information that she wasn't at liberty to tell people, even Jax at the time.
Because only the perpetrators would have known.
Right. And so police actually at the time, you're going to hear me doing that a lot because it's just so dumb. So police actually theorized at the time that Danny had killed Kathy and then abducted Ashley and Laura, left completely because at that moment in time, no other bodies had been found inside the home. They were immediately like, well, how could he have taken 3 girls when, like, all of their cars were still out front?
The keys were in Laura's car.
The keys were actually still in Laura's car. Danny had a white 1990 GMC flatbed truck, and Kathy had a silver 1998 Toyota Corolla. Laura's car was a blue 1989 Chevy Cavalier, all out front. So
This is where I shake my head again.
yeah, we're about to get in the nitty gritty. And the girls weren't even entered into a missing persons database at that time.
And if you're unfamiliar with BOLO, it is where you it will put out a signal to all the surrounding law enforcement agencies to let them know that there is a child missing without actually going to the extent of an Amber Alert.
And here's the thing too, is that you and I were trying to think, like, why didn't they even put out an Amber Alert? And we were like, oh, well, maybe it didn't exist at the time. No, in fact, it did. It was actually put into effect in 1996.
I knew it was somewhere around there, but I was sitting there thinking, when did the Amber Hagerman case happen?
3 years before.
Okay, so pretty close. Mm-hmm. Pretty new. Amber Alert would have been pretty new. I mean, extremely new at that point.
It would have been, but because I think that's a plus side, because it's so new, everybody, I feel like, would have known about it and would have been more apt to use it.
But their social media wasn't like it is now.
That is true. That is true.
It's hard to know.
Yeah, and that is the thing. Like, how did they put out an Amber Alert back in the day? Because
TV,
now we all know when there's an Amber Alert, we get text messages, literally forced text messages that it's like, Amber Alert, here's the information. Yes. Back then, it was like, well, all you had was the television. All you had was
the radio.
Broadcast radio. Yeah. And so, like, there was
no cell phones.
No cell phones, nothing else to warn you. You had to see it in the little ticker tape across the bottom of the TV.
And it would break in with the, when they do, especially
the beep, beep,
you're
beep,
from
beep, or whatever.
Oklahoma, the beep, beep, beep from the tornado break-in.
Yeah.
So this would be one of those type of break-ins like you would see with the tornado warning.
However, they didn't use that. They didn't put out an Amber Alert. They didn't put out a BOLO. They didn't enter them into the missing person database. Nothing. If you think that they were just kidnapped, why would you not enter them into some form of database? Why would you not at least put out a BOLO? I remember when I worked for dispatch, that was like the first thing we did, because you put out a BOLO, it goes over the radio waves to the other officers working. So now they are aware of what vehicle they're looking for, description of the people that they're looking for, just in case, they happen by, and they do at some points, especially when you're in a small town. There's only so many places to go.
There's no answers to that either, unfortunately.
No. So Laura was supposed to be back home by 9 a.m. that morning. She had a dentist appointment she was supposed to go to. and she was supposed to be home in time to go to this dentist appointment with her mom, Lorene. But by 8:40, Laura's brother Brad was calling Lorene to tell her that the Freeman home was on fire. And he had actually heard this from his girlfriend who lived in Welch at the time. After CCSO noted Laura's car at the scene, Deputy Troy Messick made the drive from Welch to downtown Veneta to find Lorene, who was working in Veneta at the time.
County deputies showed up at the McDonald's here in Veneta, the one on Main Street. I worked at that one at that time. Walked in at 5 minutes to 8 and asked me. My son called me a little bit before that and says, Mom, because I tried to call the Freeman's house, tell Laura, you need to get home because we have dentist appointments in Grove.
Right.
But it just rang and rang and rang. That was before cell phones.
Yeah.
And he said his girlfriend Jennifer called him and said that she heard that the Freeman's house was on fire. I said, well, you take your bag and you drive across country and you get up to the Freeman, see if you can help them and check on your sister. Didn't think anything about it. In walks the county deputy, which till to this day he won't look me in the face. He said, I've never seen a more calmer, collective person in my life, with me telling you. But he walked in and said, Lorene, I need to talk to you. I said, okay. I'd always told him, one of these days, the cops are going to come and take me away from here. Today's the day, folks. He said, Lorene, I really need to talk to you. Okay, let's go back to my little bitty office. Walked in there and he said, do you know Ashley Freeman? I said, yeah, she's my daughter's best friend. In fact, Laura stayed night before last and again last night because it was so late. Mm-hmm. She's supposed to be driving home, but my son called me and said their house is on fire. I could tell by his face. I said, so it's not on fire, it's a total loss. Do you know the location, the layout of the house? I said, yeah. He said, could you tell me? I said, yeah. But you need to call and tell them my son's headed that way to check on his sister. So when he gets there, they better let him to her. He said, can you tell me right quick the layout? I said, you walk in the front door, there's going to be a wood stove as you walk in the front door. I said, you got to go around, and I said, there'll be 2 recliners against the north wall. You go to the left as you walk around the wood stove will be Danny and Kathy's bedroom. I said, if you go straight, you walk straight into the kitchen. There's a table in the middle of the floor. The bedroom to the right used to be Ashley's old bedroom. She moved to the end of the hall, to the back bedroom. And then there'll be a bathroom, and then that's where Ashley took his bedroom. She liked it better. He said, okay. And I said, well, did they find anybody? He said, well, they found a body, Lorene. I said, well, what do they think it is? He said, it was laying over the bed. I said, well, have they found any others? And he said, no. I said, okay. Didn't scream, didn't yell, wasn't crying. He said, well, thank you for your information. If we hear of anything, I'll let you know.
What?
And he left. He said, Lorene, no clue where your daughter is. We haven't found any. But he didn't know. I mean, that's it. By that time, they'd shut it down. And
he was just...
Once they found Kathy, they quit looking. The county did.
Jeez.
So I called Jay. I said, you got about 10 minutes to make it from Langley, Oklahoma to Veneta, Oklahoma. Getting Kathy's place under the ground, there's one body. He said, where's the others? I said, don't know. But you need to get here and you better drive like hell. Somebody tries to stop you, bring them on in here. They can take us on to Welch. So he got there and we left and went to Welch.
Lorene immediately called her husband, Jay, who came and picked her up, and they headed straight to the Freemans. So Lorene and Jay arrived at 9:15. By this time, the deputies had the house blocked off, and Jay and Lorene could only get as far as the end of the driveway at this point. This is where they will stay for the next 10 hours.
It's a long driveway, too.
Yeah, it is.
Extremely long.
The house sits on this weird T. It's like a T in the road.
It's a different... It's not a cul-de-sac. It kind of looks like a cul-de-sac, but with one street that goes off of it.
Yeah, it's kind of awkward because depending on which way you're coming from, if you're coming from the main road, you can run right into it.
Yes.
But it's definitely sits on a T where the road goes in front of it, the opposite way. having been there now and like knowing how many people were there and like everybody that was at the end of that driveway, it's like hard to know where they were because there's not a lot of room at the end of that driveway.
They would have had to been off of it on the T
everywhere.
Everywhere. I mean, it's really almost like if you go straight towards it, you go past almost where it tees off before the house is. Yeah. So you actually have to back up a little bit to go off on the T.
Yes. Yeah, you do. Yeah. It's a very awkward spot.
It's different.
Yeah. Which is another reason why I think, and we'll get to this later, but I think that whoever did this knew that property. You know what I mean?
Oh, it's not something you just stumble upon.
No, it is not. Like I said, we got lost on the way there. We ended up having to turn around and go back the other direction because we thought it was on one end, it was on the other end, blah, blah, blah. But you definitely can't just have the address and get there and know where you're going. Like, you need to know this home previously, I feel like, to have, got in and out and done this. But anyway, okay. So, keep that in mind. 9:15 a.m., they stayed there for 10 hours.
Got there and walked up there, and they're like, I said, so what's the deal? The Hayes boys walked down there, and I was like, I said, so you found a body laying over that bed? And they're like, yeah. I said, well, I guarantee it's Kathy. Does she have a ring on? He said, well, there's one on the left hand. I said, well, that's Kathy. So where's Danny and the two girls? They're somewhere up there. This is 5:30 in the morning. They'd have been asleep. They're going to be in that fire. Well, we've already called OSBI. We can't do anything till they get here. Well, how long's that going to take? Well, they'll be here by 10:15, 10:20.
And then around 10 or 11 a.m., the OSBI finally shows up. They're led by Steve Nutter. He had come from Owata County Sheriff's Office, which is the next county over, where he was actually working another case. And the OSBI finally, at that time, called the county coroner. 11 a.m., the ADA, Clint Ward, actually made an appearance on scene at one point. And he was heard. Now, this is the assistant district attorney. He was overheard by several bystanders saying that Danny owed a lot of money in drug debt. I don't know how he knew this. I'm not sure how he knew this, but he said that Danny at the time was the prime suspect. He did. So it's almost like they're setting the narrative.
Open and close to them.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
Okay, here we sit and wait. They pull in. They pull up there. What's his name? Gets out with his boots on and his big Stetson and walks up there. Looks at the body, tells them to call the county coroner. So by that time she calls, and when they call her, she says, well, tell them I'll be there as quick as I can. I'm doing an accident here. So we sat. We wait.
Now it's 3:30 p.m. The coroner finally gets there. Her name was Donna Warren. Lorene actually knew her personally. She had been Lorene's mother's primary care physician, and so she actually knew her. And she actually told Lorene that she couldn't outright ID the body as Kathy at that point, but she did notice that the woman was wearing a wedding band on her left hand and that she had, quote, bore children.
So that's Kathy, and she said, well, I can tell you this. She's got a ring on her left hand, and she has bored children. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not neither one of the 16-year-old girls, so it's Kathy.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, have they seen any other bodies? And she said, Lorene, they say they did. They've looked. That's what they spent before I got here. You got to remember, it's cold, it's dark. By that time, there's no lights or nothing. But by the time she got there, they got the body out. It was 2:30, and then they made a quick look of, okay, we're going to look now that the body's not there.
Shortly after 4 p.m., Kathy's body was driven away from the scene. At 5 p.m., OSBI was sure there was nothing left to investigate. So they released the crime scene to Dwayne Vansell. Remember the stepbrother who was the first one there from the family.
After they just found a body. And they still don't know where 3 people are.
Nope.
They released the scene.
They
I just have
released
to
the
add
scene.
that in. I'm sorry. It is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
Dwayne actually said that Steve Nutter handed him the search warrant they had used to investigate the property. Handed it to him. And he noticed on it that it was obtained at 2:06 p.m. And Lorene says it best. The cars had briefly been inspected for evidence. No furniture had been overturned. No searches of the larger property as a whole had been done.
And it's a pretty large property.
It's a pretty large property. And still, no bolo had been put out for the girls or Danny.
Because I had enough evidence I could have started World War III with the OSBI. But that's what it was between the Freemans and the sheriff department for a year of fighting. That's how we ended up where we were at.
Yeah.
Because everybody decided Danny went off because somebody called in a thing that said they thought they saw Danny at a gas station in a white Ford truck with the 2 girls.
With the girls, right.
And he wanted to trade the girls for David
Oh my gosh.
Hayes. So the whole time they were knowing this while we were standing out there, never said a word till later that evening. Oh, well, they were going to wait till the next day because they talked to Dwayne that night. And Dwayne said, well, if he's hid out and he's, quote, on the old Freeman property, it's 3 miles from where we were at the fire on a piece of property, you guys should have gone over there and talked to the guy, Mr. Brown, that owns that land. He would have let you in and search. So Dwayne told him, he said, well, I'll go talk to the Browns in the morning. Find out exactly if Danny's over there. I told him, I said, well, okay, daylight, we're going to be up to Freeman's house. Because they turned the whole scene over to us at 5 o'clock the first night. It was quick to follow that hunch.
Yeah.
Here's Danny went off the deep end, shot Kathy, took the girls.
Okay, so Kathy, let me tell you about Kathy. Kathy was a stay-at-home mom. Danny went off to work every day. When Danny was younger, and this is kind of important, but I'm going to tell you about his past a little here. So when he was younger, he had accidentally shot himself in the forehead while he was cleaning his rifle. And the breech plug in the rear of the muzzleloader barrel blew back into his head and through his skull. Well, the plug actually had lodged in his brain. Danny drove himself to the hospital. He waited in the ER for 2 hours, got sick of waiting, left, drove another 2 hours to another hospital, and doctors were immediately like, oh my God, what happened? And they immediately took him into the OR for literal brain surgery. They had to replace part of his skull with bone from his hip. And I believe somewhere, I think it was Dwayne that said that he had a plate put in there in the front of his skull.
A metal plate.
Yeah, a metal plate.
When the Freemans used to live across the section from our house instead of up at Welch, he sold drugs, he sold marijuana, but he didn't take care of his family. And we know that because all of us girls, all our kids, played together.
Ran around together, yeah.
And there would be times we'd check with Kathy and say, oh, is everything all right? And she said, well, I don't know what we're going to do. So all us young mothers would pull together and we'd make sure that the kids had what they needed, groceries, because what he wanted to do was top priority. Get mad if you don't do what I want. I'm the king of my castle. Lord help you. He worked in shops where drugs were sold. I mean, people in Bonita tell you they bought marijuana from him.
The next day, Laura's parents, Lorene and Jay, they went back to the home. They were kind of hoping that they could find some sort of clue of what happened. They kind of almost knew at that point that the police were not going to help them. They had only been there for 5 minutes when they made a shocking discovery.
Anyway, so we get there the next morning. Me and Jay are step over. We're looking down underneath it. We look up. The floor was over here on the west side of the trailer. And there was Daddy's Rottweiler beside him. I was laying there beside him, and Jay says, Lorene, be careful, that Rottweiler's up here. And I said, oh, she's tame. She's not bad. And she got up, and Jay's like, Lorene, come here. He said, there's a body up there. So we climbed up on the floor, looked at it, had no face.
So you could just see with your eyes. You didn't have to touch anything or move anything.
He was laying like this. His feet was actually touching the waterbed, and he was laying back to the east, laying in the doorway. His head and shoulders was in the doorway of the bedroom. His feet was touching the waterbed. Up against the wall was along this. This arm was laying in the wall when the house burned.
Yeah.
The few times I was up there, at times getting Laura or dropping Laura off, her and Ashley was going to a ball game or whatever. The dog wasn't mean.
Like just docile, didn't care.
You know, hey, come walking up and you pet it. So it wasn't a vicious walk.
So they probably.
But like I said, the dog got up and walked off of there, and we found Danny's body. And by that time, Dwayne come driving up and said that he'd been over there to the people that owned their old Freeman property, and he said there was a hunter and his son had been there for a week in a white Ford truck. He looked and he said, "Oh my God, Lorene." So Jay said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I got to go 2 miles up the road here, and I'll make a phone call." And I mean, my 911 call, if they'd ever release it, shows. My name is Lorene Bible. I'm at the Danny and Kathy Freeman property yesterday where they took Kathy out of the fire. There was no bodies. There's a body. Danny. I was like, "Could you repeat what you just said?" I said, "We found Danny Freeman today. Would you like to send somebody up here, please? Thank you." So I drove 2 miles and said, "Okay, a deputy will be here." I knew it was the same deputy that come the day before, and he looked at me and he said, "Lorene," said, "just get up here and look at this body." Danny's hair the whole time. And that's what I told her name was Czar, a black lady from OSBI. And she said, "Well, you're the mom. You tell me where you think your daughter is." I said, "You're the expert. You tell me."
Yeah.
This fire happened at 5:30 in the morning. She should have been inside the house in front of the TV if the girls stayed on the couches watching TV all night, or back in the damn bedroom. We found her purse, found some of her clothes, so she should have been in here. So you tell me.
And her keys were still in her car, right?
Yep, keys were still in the car. They didn't even open up the trunks to see if maybe they'd shoved them in the trunk.
My goodness.
Killed them and shoved them in there until we made them the second day. Danny had a pistol that he carried underneath the front seat of his truck, and that's what Dwayne was wanting. He said if Danny would have left, he would have took that pistol. He carried it with him everywhere. Dwayne went back there after he got done the first night with the sheriff's department talking to everybody, and he went up there and he said it was underneath the seat of that truck. No, he was laying there the whole time. So I have stuff from at the time that was given to our Bonita Daily Journal that the scene was turned over to the family because they'd gotten all the evidence. I went to the guy that owned the newspaper and he said, "Lorene, I'll give you this, but I ain't no way in hell I'm going to print that." He said, "That's going to get me." He said, "I am so sorry, young lady." I said, "Can I have a copy of that?" So when I get ready to go up against the OSBI, he said, "Yep, here you go." I said, "Right now, I don't want." That's where we got to this point. People not doing their jobs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is the bickering and the fighting. I said, it has to be about the girls till we can locate the girls now. Danny and Kathy was in the fire. We got to find those girls. And that's my mission now. He looked and he said, "Oh my God." In fact, he quit within 2 weeks. He quit the sheriff department.
Wow.
And he called on his little walkie-talkie that back in the day they had all those things that, you see them. And he talked and he said, he gave him his badge number. And he said, "What I was sent up here to do north of Welch or west of Welch, northwest of Welch, is confirmed." Because he wasn't supposed to say because people had police scanners back in the day, lots of people. Well, it didn't take long. Boy, we had tons of OSBI agents walking up telling us, "Get the hell back." My husband said, "Let me tell you, this is not your scene. You turned it over to the families last night, yes or no?" "Well, yeah, but he said no. Today, you got us. I'm going to be in your back. No, I'm going to be in your damn front pocket all day. My ass ain't going nowhere." "Well, we need to quarantine this." Did you guys not say, and I was saying it loud enough, 150 people sitting there listening to me. Did you not say you were the experts? Yes or no? You. pointing at Czar. You told me you were an expert. You searched. How the hell did you miss that body laying right over there? In fact, go look at it real close. You can see a boot print up and down his torso and his legs. They're your boots from yesterday, the ones you got on today. You walked on the body and couldn't feel the difference. So don't give me shit. Don't tell me you did your jobs. You didn't. Denny's been laying here the whole damn time. You tell me.
They had missed another body, burned almost beyond recognition. It was identified as Danny. He had also been shot to death at close range with a shotgun. So Ashley and Laura's bodies weren't there. They found Danny. They found Kathy. They had searched themselves, and they were not there. Nor were they in the vicinity, because they had searched the property.
She said they searched every inch.
They did, yeah.
You people could have done your jobs. You didn't. So today, me, our family, and those 150 people standing there will do what needs to be done. What are you going to do? I said, well, those people are going to form a line, and we're going to start picking stuff up. Well, what are you looking for? What if those girls are underneath the refrigerator or the stove or the table or something that's fell over them on their way out? So we formed a line. They're like, well, we don't want to. You know what? The scene's already been compromised, you stupid people. We're going to form a line. They're all going to form a line, and we're going to start doing it. Some of these guys are big and strong enough guys. They can pick up stuff, and we're going to make a pile of shit out there. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what we did. And then when we got everything out that we could, then we called in people, brought big chop saws. We cut the trailer axles in half. Hooked up a tractor to them, and we pulled it apart till we was on the floor.
Yeah.
There was 4 guys that walked in that house. Daddy had a lot of rifles, him and Shane and Ashley. They all had rifles. We'd set them out on the west side of that trailer, and they stood there for months out there.
Did they ever look to see if any of those guns were missing?
No.
And none of those were, like, put in evidence or anything, were they?
No. I think they come there because Daddy owed somebody money. It's prime time, so when they're done, they knew he collected arrowheads. I mean, this is somebody he knew that come there. Yeah, well, that's what we're told. They did not know the girls were there.
Laura's purse was actually left behind with her driver's license and $200 inside. Either the robbers did not get to that area of the
They didn't know
house.
the girls were there.
They didn't know the girls were there. And that probably robbery was not on their high to-do list, or they probably would have just grabbed a purse and gone, you know. So, you know, this suggests that also that the girls were abducted and that they didn't just leave on their own.
That's such a
And
long
even
time.
when the SBI agents got there, they kind of like looked around, but they didn't move anything because every floor, because the back side of the trailer was a trailer home, and they'd built on a living room and a bedroom on the front of it. But all the floors had burned through.
My goodness.
And everything that was up high fell down, like the refrigerators,
Yeah.
the deep freezers and stuff. Everything had fell through
They
the
weren't
hole.
even looking under stuff.
No, they didn't move anything. They
Okay.
said they did. They told me they did. From what we've heard is that the girls ran out the back door. Went out into the pasture and was
Right.
like bent down like they were hiding. While all this was taking place inside the house catch fire, and the girls popped up. By that time, the guys were all outside, and they saw them. They went around them and grabbed them and took them out of there.
You've reached the end of our episode. All suspects are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Join Raven next time on the Sirens Podcast.
Do we have an outro? That's our outro, isn't it?